Well, hello once again, everybody. This is Terry from Jensen. Thank you for being with me if you're with me. And if you're watching this as a recording, thanks for tuning in. Anyhow, I'll say good morning or afternoon or good day or evening or wherever it is your time zone. But welcome to our broadcast. Today we're going to be talking about the MiYO mixings, the colors, consistency, mixing, do's and don'ts, things like that. So, uh, maybe you know all this, maybe you don't. We'll see what happens. Let's go ahead and get started. And I'll apologize first for the compressor. So anyhow, MiYO color, mixing consistencies, do's and don'ts. So you want to make sure you have the consistency right because it makes a difference. So it is one of the most important considerations along with the bleeding of my compressor. So lumps in your color signify a non-homogeneous mix of pigment and ceramic material. You want to make sure that you have a nice even mix so you don't get changes in the chroma. So daily about 5 to 8 seconds. If you haven't mixed it up in about 2 weeks, about 10 to 14. And if you're 4 weeks plus, you can count on probably about a half a minute. You want to make sure that you use the in-sync paste glaze liquid when you're mixing MiYO colors, reconstituting the colors of the structure for trouble-free results. It's engineered for this material. Now, you've heard me talk about the WYSIWYG before. What you see is what you get, but not with water. So you see on the left there, I have Merlot, raspberry, pumpkin, and shade A. And down at the bottom, I have water underneath the second column and in-sync paste glaze under the third. And you'll see as I mix water that the colors start to get cloudy. Now, I'm not saying you can't fire the MiYO colors with water. I'm saying you won't know what you have till after it's fired. And the only thing the in-sync paste glaze liquid will do as far as the trueness of the color is that you can use it to dilute the colors, but it won't change the colors. And when they're diluted, they'll fire exactly as they look as applied. So you can see where the in-sync paste glaze liquid looks true to the first column on your left. And if you look at that where I'm adding it to shade 8, you see it get a little kind of cloudy. The same thing with the pumpkin. It gets kind of a cloudy look to it. That's all. Also, it's very hard to manipulate it and keep it from wanting to drift or drool or sag when it's mixed with water. So I would tell you that if you look at the water, the raspberry and the pumpkin, you see the pumpkin, I'll mix it up a little bit there, just a little bit cloudy. It just gets kind of a ghostly look to it, just like that shade A right there. Whereas when you mix it with the in-sync paste glaze liquid, it looks true to form. That's about all I can say about that. You know, I've done it with water. It fires out okay, but I got to tell you, it's a little iffy because you don't know what it is. It's kind of like the people that try to apply color on blue block while it's still purple or violet. Now, even though you don't want to use water, I use water to clean my brush. So I thought I'd throw this in there. So I got my water bowl right there with a tissue under it. And I wiped the brush to remove the water. Yeah, you're probably only going to get out about 90–95% of it. But then I use the in-sync paste glaze, which I have in one of those little wells there. And by capillary action, it'll draw the liquid up in between the bristles, so it'll displace the water. So you don't have to just clean your brush out with in-sync paste glaze liquid. You can use water, but just make sure you get a little bit of the glaze liquid in there, and it'll make it apply the colors. They'll slide off. It acts like a separator. You don't want it to be excessive, so I wipe it off with my finger. I mean, you could use something else. And reconstitution, if you get a jar you haven't used in months and it's leaked a little bit, sooner or later you're going to have to reconstitute it. So when you have part of a jar of color and it's too thick, first attempt to mix it up to get an idea how much mass you have in the jar and also how far dried out it is. Only use that in-sync paste glaze liquid to mix. I'm going to tell you right now, you can use other stuff, but if it doesn't burn out correctly, you're going to get a grayish tint. So add sparingly according to the amount of material you have left in the jar. If you just have a little bit, you might only have to add a half a drop. If you have a half a jar and it's fudgy like this, you're probably going to have to add a drop to 2 drops. So I have my blue spatula here, and I can see when I add color, the liquid to it, and I can add it in the color. Now, every time I add the liquid, I mix it up for about 4 or 5 seconds, and you can see It has, it's getting close, but it's still a little bit on the thick side. I would say take your time and get it right. Now we're looking for a consistency where it's kind of a honey-like consistency, and it should sag, pull out and sag and be nice and even like that. And see, I'm making sure I get it right where I want it, because if it's too thick, it's going to make it a little bit harder in the long run if you have to dilute it a little bit more. The main thing is get it nice and smooth and homogeneous. Get it so that when you mix it, you see the diameter of the jar mouth. You want it to be able to sag just about that length. So you see me pull my spatula out and you see it starting to sag right there. That's what I'm looking for. So when it's totally dry, and I gotta tell you, I had to work to get this. It just fought drying out. So I end up using a heat gun to dry it out. But what I did is I've actually been to labs where the paste glaze was solid, just like a plaster or just like a dried toothpaste. And if it's totally dry, I'll crunch it up and in the bottom here. And now what I've done is I've taken a new MiYO jar. Well, new meaning it's empty, but it's the glass with a black top, and it's more like a mortar and pestle. There's no ridges like there are in the glazed paste jars. And I'll put it in there just because that jar is easier to mix in. You have inside ridges in the paste glaze jars, but not in the new color jars. So generally I'll add some liquid, depending again how much mass you have. If I have a half a jar, I'll add 2 or 3 drops. And if it was solid there, I would just break it up by spatula to 2 or 3 big clumps. So I had some cracks in there and cracks in the material. And then I would add the liquid and I would let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. Ideally, if you just try to mix it up immediately, you spend a lot of time mixing. So I have 10 minutes set the timer there. I open it up, it's absorbed into there. You can see it's clumped up. But again, it would be kind of hard to mix all this up with a spatula. You can do it, but here's what I found. We have these in the lab, Sharpies. It's just like a mortar and pestle. There's no internal corners in this jar. It has a rounded bottom. And I can take the Sharpie just like a mortar and pestle and ensure everything's to a homogeneous mix. It's really a great little tool to have because we all have Sharpies around the lab somewhere. I like the rounded end ones. If you have the extra fine points, they have the flat ends, but just these rounded ones work great. So once I get it to it's kind of a pasty mix, now I can take and add, just as you saw me do before, with a spatula. And again, depending upon how much material I have left will depend upon how much liquid I put in. Try to get it to where it's starting to get like chewing gum, where it kind of strings, but it's not loose. And then sneak up on the viscosity because you don't want to get it too loose. And we'll cover that at the end of the presentation here. But you just want to be careful to get it just where you want it. Now, the in-sync paste glaze, you can get that a little thinner than the colors, but you don't want to get it too thin. So the progression of the mixes, we start off, if it's hard, we have to break those up and put the liquid in there. If it's fudgy, I'll stir a little bit of liquid in there, peanut butter, cream cheese consistency, something like that. Then what I'll do is start adding the liquids carefully. But if you go too fast and you get too much liquid in there, it's going to get thinner. It's easier to thin a small portion of a normal standard consistency to what you want. And if you get it too thin, the color pigment wants to fall out of suspension. So you can unscrew the lid, but keeping the jar lightly covered will allow the excess liquid to evaporate, but this is probably going to take about 1 or 2 days to get the desired results. I have my infamous $25 toaster oven. So the unscrewed jar can be placed in the toaster oven to hasten the process at about 200 to 215, but the jars, the old ones that were plastic, had the white lids, you can't do it in that. So if you have to dry it out, put it in one of the newer jars and that'll work. So remember, mixture consistency and application technique are the keys to aesthetics, predictability, and the speed with MiYO color and in-sync paste glaze. So this has been briefly covered, but the main thing is keep your consistency where you need it. It'll make it easier. It's a little bit better in your wells if it's not too thinned out, because you can always take a little bit out and put on a flat surface and thin it out a little bit more if you need to have a very dilute color. It's hard to thicken it up quickly. It's easier to thin it down quickly. Always use the in-sync paste glaze liquid. It'll make it a lot easier. If you have a brush that's not clean, the colors won't release easily, so rinse your brush off with water, dry it out, put a little bit of the in-sync paste glaze liquid in it, and it'll work like a dream. Always be careful to not try to push through your paste glaze base, because it'll make it apply a lot easier. So, if you still have questions, call our technical department at 800-528-5531 for further assistance. Make sure to follow Jensen Dental on Facebook and Instagram so you can be updated every time we go live. And you can also visit jensendental.com/MiYO to learn more about MiYO. Also, we have our new website, www.MiYoWorld.com, and we have videos there, and you can see these videos later on YouTube or Facebook. Thanks for watching today, and please click the follow button to get notifications of future MiYO education tips and tricks. This has been Terry with Jensen. Please call us if you have any questions. My email, if you need me, is tmq@jensendental.com. Thank you very much for your time. Be safe and be careful. Thank you very much.